Hi, this is Bruce Kidd with the Kidd Consulting Group. Another installment of our Insights for Executives video series. I'm delighted to have a friend and a special guest today with me, Greg Stanley, who is a experienced and talented sales advisor to private companies. Greg, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Bruce.
Today's topic, you could argue which topic is most important. All of them are important in some regard. But it's pretty hard to have a successful company unless you can grow your top line, unless you can drive revenue. Fair?
Fair enough, and I would say even beyond that, growing the top line is important. Growing the bottom line is more important. So that's really, I think, where a lot of focus is lost in small and mid-sized businesses.
That's actually a really good point.
We try to help business owners focus on.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So you and I have talked about a recent study that was done where up to 250,000 companies, private companies around the U.S., are likely going to be looking at selling in the next few years. Mm-hmm. And the challenge with that is only 5% are likely to get the valuation, the price they want for that company.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? And let's just start there by you sharing with our owners who are watching this. What do they need to be doing to be in that 5%?
Yeah, so I would say a couple of things, and you reference a KeyBank study, and it's got pretty good market validation, and I think has some pretty good substance to it. The interesting thing to me is that, in my opinion, and part of what motivated me to start the firm that I've got, is I saw many business owners with relatively successful small and middle market businesses that were running their business in a way that created a nice lifestyle. With no real intention to exit and not building the business around the potential for exit. And my view is a couple of fold. Number one, the sooner a business owner starts running their business as if they want to exit, the more options they will have to exit and the more meaningful those exit options will be. And the more intentional they are in alignment with that in focusing on building the value of the business as opposed to taking cash out of the business on an annual basis, that also will help them run a business that at some point will be sellable and have some level of market attraction.
I don't know if it's a fair comparison, but it reminds me of, we just went through this hotbed of real estate activity, home selling for way above list, and you have to be there quick to get one. It's a little bit like a business owner treating their business like their home, in that they buy a nice home, they don't really care about taking care of it, and yet when they go to sell, they're expecting to sell it for more that they bought it. That's the idea.
Yeah.
That's what they call equity.
Yeah.
But it's the same deal in your business. If you're not thoughtfully thinking about building enterprise value, when you go to sell, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, and there are a lot of aspects to that will affect ultimately organizational value. A lot of business owners look at, and a lot of buyers look at, previous growth, the potential for future growth, scalability, those kinds of things, many of which aren't necessarily done very intentionally by the business owner. We've had a really fortunate period of time, over a decade, of a very hefty tailwind of the economy. And like you referenced the real estate, for those of us that were around in 05 and 06 and 07, when anything anyone touched in real estate was going to make money and everyone felt like they had it figured out, it took a period of time like 08 and 09 to see who really had it figured out, who was really running a solid operation and had optimized what they were doing in real estate. Yeah. And a lot of the others got flushed out, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I know what you do day to day with private company owners. You help them enhance, improve their revenue function in their companies, again, with an eye on building enterprise value. Tell the audience, what does that mean to you, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's interesting. What I see a lot of business owners do is They address the revenue function when they realize they have a problem, not necessarily before. So that's a bit of an issue, just to make sure that you're doing things. As Gino Ariema, the coach of the UConn women's basketball team, says, the best time to understand why you're winning games is while you're winning games, not when you start losing.
Yeah.
And so taking a look objectively at the revenue function, and I say revenue and function very intentionally as well, because in my view it needs to be evaluated holistically. And what many business owners do is they don't address the revenue function until they realize there's an issue. And then once they realize there's an issue, they attempt to address the issue with point solutions.
Yeah. So we've all sort of endured this past 2 years of an uncertain world and economy and business climate, life. How has that driven, from your perspective, how has that driven business owners to think about being better at this revenue function, this driving enterprise value? Again, as you said, Gino said, learn what you're doing well when you're winning, not when you're losing. Well, we've all been challenged the last couple of years. What do you see happening in private companies during this pandemic and uncertain business climate?
Yeah. What I see is everyone dealing with the same types of situations and the same types of issues, right? The factors around the economy, whether it's interest rates going up, the labor market, the supply chain issues, those have been universally impactful to the vast majority of business owners. And those were factors that really weren't necessary to take into consideration prior to the last 2 or 3 years. Now that they are embedded in the business environment and the economic environment, it's critical that now they take a look at their revenue function holistically. They figure out how, where, and with whom they're making money, how to align resources, how to compensate people for driving value, all the things that would have to do with running a holistically, very focused and intentional revenue function in spite of this environment.
Yeah.
People can be very successful even in an environment like this, as long as they have optimized their organization going into it.
Yeah. So, 2 key drivers of top and bottom line. Top line, ultimately, then the bottom line in an organization, irregardless of industry or size, really, I think, the marketing group and the sales group. They're on the front lines. But we often see, I know you do, often see that they don't work very effectively at driving new revenue potential in those companies, the desired revenue potential of the owner. Why do you think that is, and what could owners be expecting to do differently?
Yeah. Unfortunately, in those situations, and it's sometimes a hard message for business owners, it's not necessarily a sales function or a marketing function that isn't working effectively. It's a leadership function.
Okay.
And the business owners, in my opinion, have a responsibility to establish the mission of what they're doing, how that mission is communicated to the market, how sales and marketing are integrated, the compensation structure that drives the behavior of the sales team, the target market segmentation, what an ideal client looks like. All of those things, in my opinion, should be determined by the ownership of the company and not by the sales and or marketing team. And then once those things are established, sales and marketing should be integrated in a way that makes both more effective and drives net new revenue, and not just net new revenue of any kind. A lot of organizations, I think, operate from the perspective of scarcity, where any revenue is good revenue, as opposed to being very intentional about going after those clients that have the potential to be high growth and highly profitable and highly accretive, ultimately to valuation of the organization when and if they decide to exit.
Yeah. So I've heard you tell people, business owners, that sales training in and of itself and technology, if you want to use technology, but marketing lead gen strategies or products don't necessarily drive the top line revenue enhancement that you think they should. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting, as a professor of sales and sales leadership at Butler University, I understand the importance of things like sales training. I understand the importance of things like marketing, but the challenge, I think, goes back to my comment about business owners largely treating these as individual aspects of a revenue function and going directly to point solutions to potentially more easily but less effectively fix what is a bigger problem. And the holistic issue is really the lack of integration of the revenue function and the lack of mission and strategy, go-to-market strategy, target market segmentation, all of those things being looked at as one holistic machine as opposed to the individual parts, and not going to, I'm going to send all my salespeople to sales training and that's going to fix everything, or I'm going to get a marketing agency to generate leads for my salespeople who are already fairly ineffective at closing leads, and that's going to fix everything. Or I'm going to implement a CRM system, and that's going to fix everything. None of those individual point solutions ever fix everything that is endemic within a revenue function.
Yeah. So I want to make a point of clarification. You do teach at Butler.
I do.
But you're not an academic.
I'm not an
No
academic.
offense to our friends in academia. You're a business guy who has taken the time to teach sales leadership and sales process improvement at Butler for students.
Yeah, I've got a 30-year career in helping both small and large companies in high growth environments build practices, build sales organizations, build marketing organizations, go-to-market strategies, those types of things, prior to taking on just over the last year an adjunct faculty role.
Yeah, I just wanted our audience to be clear with that, because I know you're a business guy, first and foremost. For my last question, I'm going to paraphrase a longer question with what I think is really at the heart of the matter, given your experience with private companies. Uncertain times for all of us the last couple of years, even though I know a lot of companies had record years last year in sales. And I would tell you that many of them have told me they don't really know why. Like, they can't explain why the demand flip-flopped so quickly from the first year of the pandemic to the second, because they were down the first year. This year is turning back to be more realistic as far as growth for a lot of companies. Down, maybe still up, but down from where they were. So the question is, for the owners of businesses out there and other executives that are helping run them, we've still got this sort of uncertainty in the economy. What would be 3 things you would tell them to really think about focusing on to build the right process from a sales engine standpoint, and building enterprise value along the way?
Yeah, great question. And what I would say is, I hope we don't talk ourselves into a recession or a recessionary period of time. I know there's been a lot of talk about this. My view is these things tend to be fairly self-fulfilling. We talk more about a recession, people retrench, people stop hiring, people hoard money or cash, don't make investments, and then it becomes self-fulfilling. In advance of that, though, so whether we do or don't have a recession, it really, I think the basic principles and the fundamentals stay the same. It is, as a business owner, understand how, where, and with whom you make money, and make sure that you understand from a products and services perspective, from an internal people perspective, and a customer's perspective, where is your profitability coming from? Not just your top line revenue, because those that aren't necessarily in alignment with your net profit or your growth. And those are the things that are going to be looked at when you start talking about valuation of your organization.
Yeah.
So understand that, understand what your target market segmentation is, and how you go to market in a way with the alignment of the resources that you've got. In a time where there's labor shortage, you can't necessarily throw salespeople at the market and expect them to be, number 1, available, number 2, inexpensive, and number 3, effective in a short period of time. So how do you get the resources that you have operating more effectively in the environment that we're in alignment with the mission that we have? And part of that starts with a job description, making sure that there's cohesion between a job description and KPIs and an accountability structure, and ultimately compensation that's going to drive the behavior of the sales team. And then making sure that where you're spending marketing dollars or investing marketing dollars, those are done, again, with a high degree of intentionality around the concept of building value in the organization and creating an alignment with the sales organization. So it's not just brand creation, it's demand creation that ultimately results in the acquisition of net new clients that are highly profitable and fit the profile of what's going to be accretive to valuation. And it really comes down to operating with the mindset of, number 1, every decision you make is either going to be accretive to or destructive of the value of your organization. And number two, every decision you make and all of the activities that you undertake and customers you serve and employees you have all come with them an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
And making sure that you realize the opportunity cost that exists and aligning your organization in a way that is, again, very intentionally focused on building value as opposed to either building top-line revenue and or how much money that we can create based on a lifestyle business for something that ultimately may not be scalable, may not be strategically integrated in terms of your products or your people or your go-to-market strategy, and that you have a way out of the business as a business owner. Because ultimately, as a business owner, whether you think you will or you think you won't, you will exit the business at some point.
Yeah.
It's a matter of, do you want to exit in a way that's going to maximize that one opportunity you'll have to exit, or are you going to have to put a chain on the door or frankly be carried out in a box because the business can't run without you?
Yeah. Really, really good insights. Thank you for that. I want to get in the weeds for just a second. One last question. I lied. You work with owners of businesses, specifically around their sales team. I mean, how do I get the most out of the team I've got? It reminds me a little bit of this year's Indiana Pacers team. We got a lot of new players, a lot of young players, and the big P word out there, potential. But we're going to have growing pains. This could be a tough season. I hope not, but it could be a low win season for the Pacers. So lots of private companies are building sales teams, and they've got the same dynamic. They've got maybe a couple of grizzled veterans, a lot of new guys and women. What advice would you give the owner of a private company about building the right kind of team that's cohesive, productive, motivated, so that they at least have the opportunity to get the most out of that revenue function you've talked about for the last 20 minutes?
Yeah.
What's important for that owner to think about putting that team together?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You put it in the context of a sports team, and I actually use many sports analogies, but one is when you're the owner of an organization and you have a set of resources, you have to look at it as you would if you were a GM of a sports franchise. If you have an opportunity for the same amount of money you're spending for a certain resource to upgrade that resource, you've got an obligation not only to yourself and your family, but every employee of your organization to put the best team together that you can possibly put together with the investment that you're making. It's a little bit of a colder way to look at it. It's just a hard fact, though. You've got to have a high-performance team. It's why I've always had a predisposition to hire former college athletes, because they have the want to, they have the desire, they have the motivation, they have the coachability, they have a lot of the aspects that translate very well into the business world. So you have to look objectively, regardless of how long somebody's been with you or the depth of relationships that you believe they have. Are they in the best spot to be high performing? And number two, look introspectively at yourself as a business owner to say, am I putting these people in the best position to be successful? Or am I doing what the vast majority of small and middle market business owners do, which is, because they come from a background that isn't in the revenue function largely, they largely come from, whether it's sheet metal fabrication or die casting or engineering or science or whatever their background happens to be, this sales and revenue function tends to be a bit of a black box exercise. So they just throw salespeople, throw marketing investments to the wind and expect that it's going to do what they believe salespeople do, which is bring back incremental revenue, which is going to be profitable and incremental. That never happens. For lack of a mission and direction and structure and process and compensation and guidance and accountability and all the things that need to go into the creation of a high-performance team, much like those aspects that go into a high-performance sports team, for lack of those, your team will never be optimized.
Yeah. I think there are tremendous comparisons between the business world and the sports world. I mean, they're teams.
Yeah.
You're ultimately talking about two different kinds of teams that have to work well together. Any other last thoughts? Anything else come to mind that you would share with the men and women out there that are running companies?
Yeah, I would just suggest look at your revenue function sooner rather than later. Part of my motivation as well in founding the firm that I founded over 5 years ago now was business owners were getting a lot of consulting in areas like accounting and finance and HR and a lot of functional areas that are really important, that the business really can't optimize or run effectively without. Having said that, if the revenue function's not running right, none of the rest of the business is going to work. Those investments in HR and accounting and operations and finance and other functional areas really aren't going to matter. So it may sound a bit self-serving, but this is an area where I really firmly believe if you get it right, it gives you the options to do a lot of things, both in terms of internal investment as well as building valuation, whether you want to get a bank loan for a piece of capital equipment, whether you want to potentially explore options around sale to a strategic buyer or a private equity investment or a family office investment or an ESOP or whatever your potential exit might be. Life is about having as many options as possible. Having your revenue function right gives you as many options as you can possibly have as a business owner.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. Business ultimately comes down to keeping score and numbers.
Yeah.
Has to. Financial statements for the bank or the accounting firm or your investors.
Yeah.
And the very first number that's really important is that sales number.
That's right.
And then run the business effectively for the bottom line number that you want so that you've got the enterprise value that the market cares about. Great insights. Thanks for taking the time. We appreciate you being here. This is a really important topic for those men and women that are running companies out there. And I appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah, Bruce, I really appreciate the opportunity and appreciate all you've done for the middle market and
thank you.
Business owners in this geography. And you're a cornerstone in this market. So I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you.
My pleasure. This is fun stuff. We will be back with another segment of Insights for Executives video series very shortly. And we appreciate you taking the time today. I hope you found it enjoyable and it's something you can actually put to use in your company. And please reach out to Greg if he can be of help to you. You can find him here on this video site. Thanks very much.